good morning.
Good morning.
It's a little hard to follow that. Sit and listen to that all day long. Thank you so much. Now, you've probably been feeling what I've been feeling all morning. There's a little bit of anxiety. Anyone feeling anxiety? Okay, I'm not alone. Thank you, God. Yes. Being anxious is just being part of human. And as such, we bring anxiety to all of our relationships. It can motivate us to change or paralyze us. How many of us walk around with stiff neck shoulders, hunched shoulders, and tense buttocks muscles? Sometimes, though, anxiety gets us motivated to move on and to change things or complete things. Anxiety is a basic human emotion that connects us to each other, just like love, just like laughter or a sense of belonging. How many of us laugh at others laughing? I remember when I taught at the massage school, we had this self-care class, and I did therapeutic laughing. How many of you probably have heard of this? So I got the group in a circle, and I said, okay, now we're just going to start laughing. What? We're just going to start laughing. Just pretend like you're laughing, and then suddenly laughter will take over. Okay. This is part of the class. Yes, this is part of the class. So some of us started pretending to, but before we even started, at one moment said, oh, you don't want to start me to laugh. And I said, oh, yes, I do. And she said, no, you, and I said, oh, yes, I do. And all the friends around says, oh, when she really just gets going, she guffaws. And I said, great, I want to hear that. And there was a petrified gentleman who worked in their airlines learning massage work, standing in this circle. And he looked horrified that we were going to just start laughing. Like, what's the point of that? And as I said, okay, let's just start laughing. So we pretended to start laughing. And we were like, ha, 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 ha. And suddenly the energy started taking over. We started laughing. And I happened to look over at this gentleman, and this just holy fear, terror-struck look, and a deer in the headlight look in this gentleman's face and in this energy. And I felt so sad for him that he was so flummoxed and so paralyzed by this. He was so in that anxious state. And what really topped it off is the room across the hall. We had our door, the classroom door shut. Suddenly we heard other people from the other classroom start opening the door and looking. That's so funny. And we turned and we started pointing to them. We started laughing even harder. It was quite a class, So. But so many of us, as with laughter, we also catch anxiety also. We can feel it as fellow human beings. So there's a whole group of people, or a small group of people can be emotionally wired together and begin to react in a mob sense reaction. And people can overreact to each other. Now, I don't know about you, but growing up in my wonderful German Catholic family, guess what the most talked about or shared emotion was? Anger. Okay. So my dad had a bad day. He came home. He started barking. My mom got mad because she was fixing dinner and she had a bad day. So she started barking at us children. And the children, of course, we started barking at the dog because the dog was in the kitchen. The poor dog was like, I just want to get some water. So it can be either acute or chronic. So acute anxiety happens in a traumatic experience, right? Something traumatic happens or really, really intense, and we can go into this place of just acute anxiety. But the good news is with that acute anxiety, it often softens through time. So that's kind of one of those where if you're like in a car accident or something happens, or you hear somebody has unexpectedly died, something like that, acute anxiety. But most of us suffer from this chronic anxiety in our life. And it's always there. And this is the one that triggers us. We'll be going along in life, journeying along, peaceful, filled with serene solitudes, and the wonderful singing, and the wonderful message of community. And all of a sudden something will happen, maybe on the highway, something somebody might say something, a relative, God bless them, might show up and say something. Suddenly we're triggered. Suddenly we're hooked. And we're in that chronic anxiety expressing. We've lost our center in that situation. So we can be set off at any given time with that. I know for myself, when I'm in those times, as the eldest child, I tend to clean, right? So you can tell how anxious I am by how clean my car and my office and my place of residence is. And right now, my car is clean, the office is clean, the house is a little bit messy. So guess what I'll be doing this afternoon? So I know my triggers to go and clean. If I can't control those outer environments, or if I can't control what's happening, I try to control what I can, which is my environment. I try to control that. If I can control that, the anxiety goes down. Unfortunately, when I'm also in that anxiety, I might appear certain ways to other people. I might magnify my differences with others. I might crave certainty, which I don't know about you, but I crave certainty. I want to know for certain, absolutely universal truth that I can get off on this exit and there won't be another road construction sign. Good luck with that, Reverend Lyle. Yes. Or I might become grumpy or having more negative view of others in my life. I have even gone so far, and this is a confession, I've even gone so far as to create an emotional cutoff with someone very important in my life. Talk to the hand. Can't deal with you right now, I don't even want to look at you. Right? So I've done that in my past. Through that being anxious, I don't have it under control. So suddenly my instincts take over and I become in this self-preservation mode. I don't think clearly, I don't respond well to people's insight, to their reason or their wisdom or their love. Just think how many times this has happened to the master teacher, Jesus. How many stories have we read from the Christian scriptures where you hear the disciples show their chronic anxiety and Jesus has to stop them and gently offer yet another parable to understand what is really going on. Even in the Older Testament, when Moses brought the Israelites out of Egypt, and they are roaming, imagine roaming in the desert for 40 years. And they say to Moses, why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in this wilderness? For there's no food and no water, and what we have is miserable food. This too can happen in our daily lives and those of our congregations. Some of the most triggers are around, hang on, here we go, money, old versus new, type of worship, major trauma, tensions or transitions. Any of this sound familiar? Pastor's leadership role, keep breathing, growth, survival, property, space, building, distance between the ideal and the real. You get the idea. James Hillman states that the word ananke derives from the root that spreads through Old Egyptian, Chaldean, and Hebrew terms for narrow throat, strangle, constrict. And it is the yokes and rings laid on necks of the captives. Ananke takes you by the throat. It holds you prisoner and drives you like a slave. Both angina and anxiety derive from this root word, ananke. The human brain, as many of you know, has 3 sections, right? We have the reptilian, which is reactive and self-preservation mode. The mammalian brain, which is more about our feelings and self-other connection. And then the neocortex brain, which holds our thinking and self-awareness. And it's here that we in the neocortex, we imagine, we problem solve, we make decisions. The thinking brain can manage the other 2 parts of the brain. But when we're in an anxious state, we go to the reptilian brain or the mammalian brain, or even both. So as you well know, Congregations are not always peaceful, tranquil, and at ease, even the healthy ones. Tensions do and always do exist. A healthy congregation, though, allows for challenge. They can be governed by insight, reflectiveness, and objectivity. They develop healthy behavior patterns, and that enable the congregation to analyze what is happening, evaluate the situation calmly, develop different responses, and decide what to do. Leaders in congregations, and that it goes from the minister all the way down to any person that has any decision-making or any influence in the congregation. Guess what? We're all leaders, okay? Have to be able to manage their own anxiety in order to bring clarity, decisiveness, and justice to the situation. The healthy congregation knows that they will not always be in harmony. And we have great examples. In the book of Acts, chapter 2, Luke says in this famous passage, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to the number daily those who were being saved. But like humans, like us, like congregations, wait a moment, in Acts 6, just 4 chapters later, there's suddenly this rivalry going on, this struggle between the Hellenistic Jews and the Hebraic Jews. Because the Hellenist Jews were noticing that their Hebraic Jews were not giving enough money and food to their widows. So there was a storm of ruin with this. And we see later in Acts 15, where Peter and James, heads of this church, start talking. And read that chapter 15, on your own leisure. It's really interesting how they come together and they talk, and they find that common bond once again. And they recommit to work together for that greater good. And here they have different congregations struggling, and there's a lot of little snips going back and forth, a lot of tension in that human family, in that early church. And as you might well know too, in all of our relationships, when two people cannot resolve their differences, their anxiety needs to be abated. Like what happened with Peter and James. They came together and talked about it. They didn't listen to the grumbling. They heard it, but they didn't follow it. They didn't go into the reptilian or the mammalian brain. So what happens is, when we stay in those lower senses of the brain, we want to what they call triangulate. So if I can't win you over in my tension with you, I'm going to talk about you to someone else. So I bring in a third person, and that person will alleviate my anxiety and help me feel better. So we all do this all the time. We cannot not triangulate in that way. What we can do is we can be aware of when we're doing it and refocus. Genesis 3, I love this story. Genesis 3, God says to Adam, why did you eat this apple? If you remember the story, what does he say? She gave it to me. It's not my fault, she gave it to me. God turns to Eve and says, why did you pick the apple? She says, the snake told me to take it. This is a prime example of how we are sometimes as humans. We always try to look out for that third party and to try to alleviate that anxiety by triangulating, getting another person involved. Now, this is not a bad thing, for we are good. We are good at our core. We are innately good. It's just our human consciousness, we tend to do this. So how can we change? From the Healthy Congregations Training Manual, there's a gentleman named Aaron Antonovsky. He says, in trying to research why people get sick and what promotes health, he came to the conclusion that there were 3 strengths that promoted health. These strengths lead to a sense of coherence. Meaningfulness. When people have an overall sense of purposefulness, they make commitments. Comprehensibility. Large word. Here's what it means. People begin to make cognitive sense of what is happening. less cautious, less fearful. When people see change, they see it as normal. They look for clarity and not certainty. If you look for the certainty, you're lost. You're like me, you're cleaning the room, being resentful because you're cleaning the room, not dealing with what's really going on. Demanding that I have a certain amount of control in my life, I will do that. But if we look for clarity, we ask questions, we stay involved, we try to be open and hear the other person's point of view. Manageability, the third one. People have confidence in their ability to deal with life. They do not act like victims. They believe they can control or influence events. And that's by stepping up and speaking our word in truth, knowing that it is all good. And if we do that in the right energy, we come together for that common good. So all of us actually try to strive for homeostasis, a sense of balance, integrity, coherence, and stability. But there are always challenges to this stability. It is in the solid sense of coherence that leads us to a more positive appraisal, effective handling, and an increase in confidence in our own resources. So how do we become more flexible? In thinking of this, and some of you might remember this, there's a 1960s movie called Where Trouble Go, Angels Follow. It's a cute movie. Rosalind Russell is Mother Superior. And they have this art teacher that these young women are attending in this art class. And one of the nuns walks by and they see, the nun watches these young women and they're going, Willow, Willow, Willow. And the nun turns to one of the students and she says, well, sister, we're practicing what it's like to be flexible and free. I always remember that picture. Sometimes I can't do that, obviously, as a chaplain in the middle of a hospital situation, but I think it. I sit there and I think, Willow, Willow. Okay, that reminds me to take a breath and go with them. So the healthy body is subtle, it's relaxed, it's at ease. The unhealthy body is tight and rigid and in dis-ease. Congregations can be in the same way. When they are resilient, they are more effective in responding and adapting to change. And they are imaginative and free to act. And I recall too, one of my seminary professors used to use children's stories in teaching the class. She was a great and wonderful teacher. She talked about a story from the Older Testament and then she ended with these words, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Jack jumped over the candlestick. If he was not nimble, he would have not been able to do so. But he was nimble first, and then he could jump over the candlestick. So resiliency means to spring back. It is a recovery of the spirit of good humor and of strength. It is the ability to bounce back and be buoyant and elastic. In resiliency, we can believe that change is a manageable process, and that we can go with the flow, willingness to learn, to give space for exploration, time to innovate, and a sense of humor. There's two quick stories I want to share. One is of one of our very dear presidents. And it shows how President Abraham Lincoln was able to hold his own presence in responding to a very anxious situation. When Mr. Lincoln ran for Congress in 1846 as a Whig, his Democratic opponent was an evangelical Methodist, Peter Cartwright. During the campaign, Lincoln attended a religious gathering. At the meeting, Cartwright gave a stirring address, after which he invited all of those who wished to go to heaven to stand up. A few rose to their feet. Now all of those who do not wish to go to hell will stand. The entire audience stood up, with the exception of Mr. Lincoln. Seeing an opportunity to embarrass his rival, Cartwright inquired of Lincoln, "Where are you going?" Lincoln stood up and said calmly, "I came here as a respectful listener. I did not know I was going to be singled out by a brother Cartwright. I believe in treating religious matters with due solemnity. I did not feel called upon to answer as the rest did. Brother Cartwright has asked me sincerely where I was going. I desire to reply with equal directness. I'm going to Congress. Note how well Lincoln defined his own self to Cartwright. When challenged by his opponent, Lincoln stayed connected to him and regulated his own response. And that, I think, is a very good example of how we as people and as congregations, us being self-differentiated, we work on our own anxiety first, and then we respond second. I can share tons of stories about working in a hospital as a chaplain, and how many times I've sat there in the presence of people, maybe in the middle of the night. One particular example was a woman, there was a code blue, and I was called to the hospital at 2:30 in the morning. And I got there, and here was this gentleman, this wife's husband there, and their daughter and her boyfriend. And they were Lutheran. And I sat and talked with the husband, who just didn't know quite what to do. She had coded, they were able to get her back, but they knew it was a matter of time before she would physically die. So she was in this active dying stage. So here we were, 2:30 to 4:30 in the morning was the time frame I was there. And I talked with the husband, and as a prayer chaplain, I listened with the ears of my heart. And I was calm, serene, certain. I knew that she was gonna die. I had to control my own anxiety, take my deep breaths, and to see from that God perspective all of what was going on. To me, she was graduating to a new higher level of consciousness. Boy, that was hard to say. But to him, that was his wife in that ICU room, a wife of 48 years, and she was actively dying. So I controlled my own anxiety and was a non-anxious presence. The daughter, being atheist, didn't want to pray, didn't want to talk to the chaplain. Get it, don't take it personally. But I said, if there's anything else I can do for you, if you want to talk, I can get you a glass of water. And by the way, a tip, when somebody's in a really traumatic experience, I've learned the colder the ice water, the better, because it helps reformulate the brain, it helps recalculate the brain. So as a chaplain here, I am, can I get you any water with that? I feel almost like a waiter, but I know that that water and that cold ice water helps rework the brain, get it out of the shock and the trauma that it's in. So it looks funny, but I know the purpose of that. So the gentleman and I went in and prayed with his wife, and they took the tubes out and allowed her to die a natural death. And I was there during the whole time with him, holding his hand, offering Kleenex, just being present. And I can't tell you how many times I want to say something. I want to fix something. I want to do something. And all that's required of me as a chaplain is to sit in that presence and know, to be a non-anxious presence. And after she died, we went back to the room, and the daughter was sitting there, and we were talking more, and as the husband was talking to the nurse, I'd given them materials about funeral homes and things like that. And the daughter turned to me, and it was really funny. At 4 a.m, she turns to me, she says, so what exactly is it that you do as a chaplain? I was speechless. So I took a deep breath and I said, well, this. I'm here listening to your stories. I hear with the ears of my heart. I'm a non-anxious presence in a very, very anxious, sad situation. And I'm here for you however I can be for you. As like your dad, we went to the room, we prayed, we discussed. If there's anything I can do for you, other than what I'm doing, let me know. But this is what I do. And part of my brain was like, are you kidding me? I got out of bed and got here at 2:30 in the morning, thank you very much. I mean, you know, but I said it with a really calm assurance. And how I said it was a very non-anxious presence. Not offended at all. It was actually a very good question. And as she was leaving the ICU area, I could tell she was disturbed by seeing other people in pain and other families crying. And so I tried to keep her connected in conversation with me. I was on the inside of the hallway, and she was on the outside looking into patients' rooms. So I tried to keep talking so she was looking in my direction, so she would not have to see that. Because I could tell by looking at her face, it was very disturbing for her to be there. And as she left the ICU, she said, "You're really good at what you do." I said, "Thank you. Thank you. This is what I do." This is what we're all called to do in a way. Not to be professional chaplains, but to be chaplains in the sense is to be there for each other, to hear with the ears of our heart, to be non-anxious, to be coming out of that neocortex rather than the reptilian and the mammalian brain, to be aware that they're there, but to respond out of the neocortex, to know that anxiety is natural and normal, to realize that we want to triangulate. When we can't figure things out with someone, we want to get someone else involved to say, "I need an attaboy here, I'm trying. Can you give me some credit here?" So that's part of being human, but being aware of it and choosing to act differently, to stay connected, to stay involved, to keep the door open, to continue the discussion, to see the differences as differences, and yet there's ways to come together in harmony. Just would like to end with, and if you have a chance, I'd like to end with this quick story. How many of you have seen The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel? Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I want to buy that video because, except the DVD. I'm of the old century. Keep doing that. People say, "Well, you're not from around here, are you?" This is the 21st century of Vermont. But in that movie, they all go there to retire in India. And all of them, I should say almost all of them except one stays. They didn't expect what they found in India. And all the characters they all have different roles they play in this. But there's only one that says, "I can't do this. I cannot, no, this does not work. I cannot stay here one more minute." And I just want to read you something that she had said. So she's Jean of Douglas and Jean, the couple, and Douglas is this real soft-spoken gentleman. Jean is the only one that has to go back, just cannot stand to be there for one more day. Well, and then I love this quote, she says, "When I want your opinion, I will give it to you." And I thought that is so much of a person in an anxiety attack. There we go, I just said it. Evelyn, played by Dame Judi Dench, she says, "I'm not sure what I should do. Nothing here is quite worked out as I had hoped." And Muriel, who is, of course, Maggie Smith, dear God, I love that woman so much, she said, "Most things don't. But sometimes what happens instead is the good stuff." Sometimes what happens instead is the good stuff. And Evelyn goes on, she states later, "The only real failure is the failure to try. And the measure of success is how we cope with disappointment. As always, we must. We all know about the future is that it will be different. So we must celebrate the changes." And I love this final line here. "Everything will be all right in the end. And if it isn't all right, then it's not yet the end." And so it is.